What's the best way to keep a music practice journal and what should you write in it? Reflecting on your music practice is such a valuable part of making progress, but sadly it's one that's often skipped. Keep listening to learn more on how and why keeping a music practice diary will help you save time, spark more creativity, improve your memory retention, and ultimately help you make better progress. Hi, I'm Fiona from Learn Music Together, and I help adults grow and develop their musical skills so they can play with confidence by sharing my Play Music Better methodologies, which focus on learning how to practice effectively. There's a well-known phrase that says what gets scheduled gets done. Yet when it comes to planning practice sessions in advance, it can be completely overwhelming and hard to know where to start. If you missed my video last week, I'd love you to check it out as I covered how to create a music practice plan with step-by-step instructions to follow. This, if you like, is part 2, and in this video I'm going to talk about keeping a music practice journal and the benefits of reflecting on your practice sessions. Now, there is a difference between your practice plan and your practice journal. Think of your plan as the action you take before practicing and your journal as the action you take once you've completed your practice. Less than 20% of people write down their musical goals and keep a detailed practice diary. Now, I don't mean a book that your teacher writes about what you're supposed to practice in. I'm talking about a practice journal, documenting and reflecting on your daily progress. A journal that you keep and update regularly, ideally after every single practice session. It's worth noting that learners who plan out their practice sessions are up to 1.5 times more likely to accomplish their tasks. But it gets even better. Those who reflect on their practice sessions in writing and review what they've written 24 hours later can increase their memory retention by up to 70%. Let's just think about that for one moment. When practicing, say you keep getting the fingering wrong on beat 2 of bar 3. If you take the time to put a note in your practice diary, you are 1.5 times more likely to get it right in your next practice session. Better still, your awareness will increase by up to 70% if you read that note before practicing it again the following day. That to me is incredible and something that's well worth doing. But you may be asking, why is this the case? Well, neurologists have shown through their research that by writing things down, you are helping your brain form a memory. When you put pen to paper, a deeper action takes place called encoding. Encoding is a process which inputs information into your memory in a way that makes it accessible. There's a much greater chance that the things that you perceive and analyse will be moved to your long-term memory if you write them down. Hence, you'll increase your chances of remembering them. This is just one of the many benefits of keeping a music practice journal. Another huge benefit is the improvement you'll probably notice in your memory recall. If you take the time to reflect in your practice journal at the end of each session, it's a way of sort of saying to the brain that this information is important and you'd like to retain it. It always interests me in how adult learners often seem to be in a rush and can be rather dismissive of anything being called practice other than physically playing their instruments. It does take time to plan and reflect on things, and if you find your inner voice trying to convince you that this planning and writing stuff is a waste of time, I want you to pause for a moment and really think about why that thought has occurred. The chances are that you find planning and reflecting difficult, and it's perhaps not as much fun as the playing. So in a way, you're kind of making an excuse to avoid it. The brain likes to conserve energy, and it's the subconscious mind's job to protect us and keep us safe. However, thinking like this limits your growth, and the research on planning and reflecting speaks for itself. Effective practice should always be based on more thinking and less playing. See the time spent writing in your journal as practice, because done with care and love, it will help you make better progress. So let's get started. And the first question that's often asked is, what type of diary should I use? Whilst it's tempting to do everything on a computer or tablet these days, I would highly recommend that you stick to pen and paper when it comes to journaling. Research has shown that typing is just not the same as writing when it comes to helping the brain consolidate memories. We make a greater connection with the shapes that form letters when we write things down. That said, once you are more experienced, and if you have the tech skills and equipment, you can use one of those pencils that you get with, say, the iPad. And that's something that I tend to do these days. The wonderful thing about that, especially if you're a perfectionist like me, is that you can write out the letters, consolidate that memory, and then with a click of a button, it can turn it into beautifully typed text. But I wouldn't go down that route at first. Stick with pen and paper to begin with, because you want all your focus to be on reflecting on your practice and taking the time to plan things in advance. And you don't want to be distracted by any aspect of technology. Whilst there are many practice diaries that you can purchase, I find that these often don't include much space to write, so I prefer a simple exercise book. You may also find it rewarding to personalise your practice diary. When I was at college, I used to spend hours wrapping my books in wrapping paper so that they look beautiful. But these days you can get a whole array of crafty things to make your practice diary look special and unique. And it'll be more personal to you if you spent that time. At the front of my journal, I like to put my practice schedule, which for me rarely changes. But if you are unable to keep your practice sessions at the same time, I'd recommend that you write down at the start of each week when you are going to practice and how long for. That way, at the end of the week, you can easily top up how much practice you've done. And if you're one of the few people who legitimately doesn't have a lot of time to practice, perhaps because you work away from home, I'd write a list of things that you can practice without your instrument in your practice journal at the front, and then make sure to take a picture so that you have it to hand on your mobile. I do have a video on things that you can do to make progress without your instrument, so I'll put a link to it in the description below. Now at the back of my diary, I like to keep a list of pieces that I've heard, perhaps in a concert, perhaps played by some friends, that I like and that I would one day like to play. I also like to keep a list of the pieces that I'm learning or have learned in the past, and ones that I can play, and also a list of pieces that I'd like to learn in the near future. And lastly, at the back of my practice diary, I also keep a chart of my musical goals. Now, planning your musical goals is another area well worth investing time in, but unfortunately it goes beyond the scope of this video. But I do have a blog post, and again, I'll put the link in the description of this video if you're interested in learning more. Now we've got the fixed things in place, let's have a look at what you would do on a daily basis. There are two main parts that you want to include when you begin keeping a practice journal, and I like to have a separate book for each. The first is planning, which is what I covered in detail in last week's video, so if you haven't had a chance to watch that yet, I suggest you do check it out once we finish this video. Planning your sessions helps you stay organised, on point, and when done well, it enables you to accomplish much more. The second part is reflection. Now, reflection empowers memory. It's the super force of learning. So write your thoughts down every time you practice. Reflection tells the brain that this information is important and it needs to be remembered. And this is so valuable in forming long-term memories and making sure that we can recall the things that we've learned in the near and distant future. Now, I like to make notes as I go along in my practice sessions so that I don't forget things. It also helps me slow the pace of my practice down, which is always valuable. You may at first find this challenging because it kind of disrupts the flow, but that's a good thing because it slows you down and makes you think more, raises your awareness and level of focus. But like I say, at first, if you're new to journaling, you may find this perhaps distracting. So know that it's okay at first to sit down and reflect on everything that's gone on in your practice, all the things that you've achieved right at the end of your session in one go, if you like. Now, if you're already feeling a little daunted by the prospect of reflecting on your practice, I want you to keep watching, as I'm going to share some questions that you can ask yourself at the end of every practice session, which should help you. I've also got a free guide which I'll link to in the description of this video, and the guide includes lots of prompts to help you get started when it comes to journaling, so you're not going to have like a writer's block. When you write in your journal, you want to describe how you feel and the physical sensations that you've experienced during your practice, as this gives the brain even more information to connect the memory to. Reflect on your thoughts during the session. So, how were you feeling? Did you get frustrated? Were you feeling happy? Did everything go as planned? Were you thinking about a particular sound perhaps when you played a bar? Perhaps you did some visualization, or you were imagining some kind of scenery or poetry as you were playing that section. You could reflect on how that went. Was it successful? Did it work? Did it sound more musical? Perhaps it didn't work. Perhaps the idea wasn't quite fitting of the music. These are all the things that you want to make a note of. You could also make a note of how successful you were at achieving things. How much progress did you make today? Did you achieve a certain metronome mark? Or did your inner voice raise its ugly head and put fear into your mind and self-doubt? Perhaps you kept tripping up in a certain place. These are all the valuable things to write down, and if you can be as descriptive as possible, that's even better. So maybe it made you really frustrated that you kept tripping up in a certain bar. Or, on the other hand, maybe you felt elated that for the first time you nailed that passage. All of this detail is so incredibly valuable in forming and connecting with memories. You also want to be as descriptive as you can about any problems and challenges you've encountered, and then write them down, and then think about what you could do differently in your next practice session to improve things. So here's a couple of examples. Maybe you write down, "It's so frustrating that I still keep making a mistake in bar 3. My third finger always seems to hesitate, which causes unevenness in the rhythm and tone. Tomorrow I'm going to try and visualize the movement of that third finger before I practice that bar really slowly. Then I'm going to try and recall the notes from memory later on in the day." So that's one idea of what you could write down. Let me give you another one as well, just to get those creative juices flowing for you. So perhaps today you experience freedom and joy with a passage that you previously had difficulties with. So perhaps you write down, "I'm feeling triumphant today as I nailed the semiquavers and my third finger moved with ease. The visualization really helped." So whatever your emotions are, write them down in detail. And over time, you may see emotional patterns that you can then focus in on. For example, perhaps you always feel anxious when playing fast notes in the upper register, and that anxiety causes you to tense up and you find it difficult to move the fingers. So if you've noticed that through your journaling, it would be worth focusing on this area of your technique to make improvements. Or maybe you learn that there's a particular rhythm that always catches you out, or a certain note that's always out of tune. It's these types of discoveries that lead to more intentional practice, and that intentional practice will serve you much better in the long run. So be observant, read back through your practice diary and see if there's any sort of commonalities, see if there's any trends of thoughts that you can perhaps make a note of and take action on. Now, for those of you listening who might procrastinate over what to write or worry that you're doing things wrong, I wanted to share with you some questions to help you get started. And don't forget, I've got a free guide for you to download with lots more suggestions. So number 1, you could write down something you did well today. So perhaps you played all the right notes with the right fingers. Maybe you got the rhythm correct. Write that down. Nothing is too simple, and don't take anything for granted. So think of one positive thing that you did well and get that written in your practice journal. Secondly, can you write down something that you found challenging and why? So it might be that you found the finger coordination difficult, or maybe there was an interval where you found it difficult to play the upper notes in tune. Perhaps you found the coordination or the balance of the hands difficult, and maybe the left hand on the piano was too loud. These are the sorts of things that you want to write down, and then have a think about why and what you can do to improve that. The third thing I'd love you to write in your practice journal is, what mistakes did you make today? Now, don't just write down, I got the rhythm wrong. Be more specific. So I got the rhythm wrong maybe in bar 2 because I kept holding the third note too long. So can you see how that's much more descriptive than just I got the rhythm wrong? And be careful that you want to be honest, but you don't want to be overly critical. So always try and aim to write things down with a positive spin rather than being brutal with yourself, which I know adults can often do. Adults can often be overly critical, which is not healthy. It's good to be observant of your mistakes. So I think by writing that whole sentence and being really descriptive, that stops yourself from being too, I suppose, overcritical and dismissive. Now you also want to make a note of the level of progress you've made. So you could keep a list of metronome marks and tick those off. It gives you a great sense of achievement. You could make a note of how many accurate repetitions you've done in a row. You could write about whether you played the dynamics well today or the articulation. Try and get creative and think of lots of different ways that you can measure your progress, because one of the things that's really motivating to do is to be able to look back and see that you have made some progress from yesterday. Sometimes progress is so slow that it's because we're living in the moment, we don't notice it, which is why in a practice journal, if we keep writing everything down, we can look back at the end of the week when perhaps we're feeling a little bit, progress hasn't been as great as we would like. We can look back and remind ourselves actually how far we've come. Perhaps at the beginning of the week you could only play it at 60 beats per minute on the metronome, but now you're at 110. Well, that's significantly faster. It's almost double the speed, but maybe it's not been quite as obvious as that because you've been living in the moment over the past couple of days. It's also a good idea to write down one thing that you can do differently tomorrow to help you better achieve your goals. One of the things, if we're not careful about practicing, is we do the same things day in, day out and expect the results to be different. Variety is the spice of life, and it certainly does help you in your practice if you can vary your methods. So have a little think at the end of each practice session and write down one thing that you can do differently tomorrow. And then my last suggestion in this video, but like I say, I've got loads more examples for you in that free guide, is think of something that you could do to make progress without your instrument. Because if you can recall things in different ways, so physically playing, perhaps saying the notes, perhaps kinesthetically playing, doing some visualization, then you strengthen the encoding process and make learning something easier. So it's always good to do some kind of practice away from your instrument regularly. I'd say at least once a day if you wanted a number on that. Now over time, if you're noticing that your reflections often have a negative tone, I want to encourage you to change your thinking. We take action based on our thoughts and feelings, so negativity can inhibit your progress. It's amazing how your results can improve just by reframing those negatives into positives. You can then use your reframed positive statements as a springboard to take more positive action. Perhaps you need to vary your practice methods more. Maybe you need to space out your practice sessions further, or look for some additional support from a music group. I know that my members in Learn Music Together find the support that's offered by everybody invaluable. Hearing others who have similar struggles can really help you be kinder to yourself, and you can also learn heaps from those who are perhaps one step ahead of you or even further. Now, just before I go, it's worth mentioning that when you do feel a little down about your progress, taking a few moments to look through your practice journal can serve as a reminder of how far you've come. Practice journals are a wonderful collection of memories that you can learn and grow from, but also enjoy reading back on. I hope you found this video helpful, and do let me know in the comments how you get on when you start your practice journal. Don't forget, you can download those journaling prompts in my free guide. The link's in the description below. And you'll also see now on the screen a link to a couple more videos that I suggest you watch if you want to learn how to plan your practice and how to reframe negative thoughts into ones that serve you better. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up because that helps it reach more people. Bye for now.